Hey guys, okay, now we're gonna do lesson 3. Here's the notes for lesson 3. We're gonna take the concepts that we learned about in our first and second lesson and apply them to factoring when we're just given a trinomial. So let's take, looking at your notes, 1 and 2, those are just review. Let's jump right into number 3. Our trinomial equals, they want the factored out binomials, so the stuff that we find in the rows and the columns after we figure out how to fill in the box. Well, I don't know if you remember from the first lesson, but we know that in our first position of the box is always our squared variable. So that's going to be our first term here. If we look at our starting trinomial and we look at it as A plus B plus C. So each of our terms are in a position. Our A term, squared term, will always go in our first box. So here that's x squared. Our C term will always go in our last box. That's our constant. That's going to be our number without the variable. So we'll have a 32 there. The trouble is going to be finding that term that goes, the two terms that we have missing in our diagonals here. We need to figure that out. And we practiced all this sums to and products by. So we're going to use that skill that we've worked on to figure out which terms go where in our missing diagonal pieces. So our sums to is always going to be the term in our B position, which in this case, B is our middle position. So B is 12x. Our multiplies together, that's always going to be A times C. So in this case, our A is x squared and our C is 32. 32 times x squared is 32x squared. Ta-da. So we need to find terms that the factors of 32x squared that when added together give us 12x. So let's find some factors of 32. Let's see here. What are some factors of 32? Well, there's hang on. There you go. Is that better? Let's find some factors of 32 that when added together give us 12x. Let's use a little brain power here. How about 8x times 4x? Well, 8 times 4 is 32 and x times x is x squared. So 8x times 4x gives us 32x squared. And when we add them together, I have 8 x's. I add, what's wrong, sweetie? Okay, let me see. Sorry about that. So when we add our 8x plus our 4x, that gives us 12x's. So we know we found it. We found our terms that are factors of 32x squared and that add to 12x. So they sum to the term in our B position and they multiply to our A times C. Okay, so now that we have our two terms, those are what we fill in the diagonals of our box with. So let's put the 8x here and the 4x there. It doesn't really matter which position you put them in. So let's go ahead and start solving the outside of our box like we did in the first lesson. So now that we have our box filled out, let's find our binomials. So what times what gives us x squared? Well, x times x gives us x squared. And since we know, I'll start with the row. Since we know our row, what times x gives us 8x? Well, 8 times x. Now that we know our column, What times x gives us 4x? Well, 4 times x gives us 4. You might see a little pattern here. When our a term has a coefficient of 1, you get. Anyway, so here are our binomials. We found our terms on the outside. We've got x plus 8 and x plus. Oh, we did it. Okay, let's practice a little more. Here, we've got, let's take a look at number 4. Here is A, B, and C, right? Those are our terms. So we need to sum to B. In this case, B, that negative goes with it. So it would be negative 7y. And multiplies together, that's A times C. 2y squared times 6 gives us 12y squared. Let's go ahead and fill in the box with the pieces that we know. So we know that in our first box is our a term, whatever our variable squared term is. In this case, it's 2y squared. We know that our last box is going to be our c term, or our constant, the number without a variable, which is going to be 6. So let's figure out our diagonal terms, our missing pieces of the box. We figured that out by finding factors of 12y squared that when we add them together equal negative 7y. Okay. So we need to multiply two things together that give us a positive, but when we add them together give us a negative. That's a little clue. We know that negative times a negative gives us a positive, right? And when you add two negative things together, it just creates a bigger negative number. So it's kind of a dead giveaway that we're going to be multiplying two negative terms together to get our 12y squared. So let's find some factors of 12y squared. Negative 2y times negative 6y. Well, negative 2y times negative 6y is positive y squared, but when I add negative 2y and negative 6y together, I get negative 8y, not negative 7y. Let's find some more factors. There's negative 3y and negative 4y. When I multiply those, I get a positive 12y, and when I add them together, negative 3y plus minus 4y, or minus 4y, gives us negative 7y. Awesome, we did it. We found our terms. Now we can fill in the missing pieces of our box. This gives us negative 3y and negative 4y. It still doesn't matter which order I put those in. This will still work either way. So now, let's fill out the missing pieces on the outsides of our box. We have a non-1 coefficient for our a term, which makes this a little more difficult. Well, I know for sure there's going to be a y and a y on the outsides here. I just don't know where the 2 is going to go. So let's investigate a little further and try to figure out where it goes. Let's look at my row. Well, 2 is not a factor of negative 3, so there's no way it's going to go in the row. But 2 can be a factor of negative 4, so we know that our 2 is going to go out here. Okay, y times 2y gives us 2y squared. Let's continue with the column, make sure we put it in the right spot. 2y times what gives us negative 4y? Well, 2y times negative 2 gives us negative 4y. Now let's go ahead and do the row. What times y gives us negative 3y? Well, negative 3 times y gives us negative 3y. Now let's use our last box to check our work, make sure we've got the right terms in the right places. So negative 2 times negative 3, negative times negative gives us positive, and 3 times 2 gives us 6, positive 6. We know we did it. Awesome. So here are our factored binomials. We've got 2y minus 3 times y minus 2. All right. I think that about sums it up. I will do a tutorial session on this. And if you have any questions, there's a complete filled out notes if you want to take a look at a couple more examples. The new concept here is kind of looking at all of the pieces of our trinomial as A, B, and C. We need to find terms that when we add them together equal the B term, and that when multiplied together equal our A times C. That's pretty much it. I think you guys can take this and run with it. So I'll see you guys at the next tutorial session.